Hare Krishna, welcome to this special program on the systematic study of the topmost among all the Vedic scriptures, the Srimad Bhagavatam. Before we begin today's session, I shall chant a few prayers. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Mudirayet Nashtaprayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjanashalakaya चक्षुरुन्मीलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः नमा ॐ विष्णुपादाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामिन्निति नामिने नमस्ते सारस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंदा हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे. Hare Krishna, I would like to welcome all the viewers again for this special program on the systematic study of the topmost of all the Vedic scriptures, the Srimad Bhagavatam. The Srimad Bhagavatam contains a total of Dvadasha Skandha Yuktoyam Shatavicheda Samyutaha Grantho Ashtadasha Sahasraha Srimad Bhagavatabhidaha. It contains 12 cantos, 335 chapters and 18,000 shlokas. We are now today we are going to begin the fourth canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, the analysis and study of the fourth canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam that contains a total of 31 chapters and 1443 verses. The principal main subject matter, the topic of the fourth canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam is with respect to the glorious personalities and the very great and exalted personalities who appeared in the family of Swayambhuva Manu. The first among the Manus of this universe is Swayambhuva Manu, and we have already studied the history of the eldest daughter of Swayambhuva Manu and Shatarupa. The wife of Swayambhuva Manu is Shatarupa. They had 5 children. 2 sons, they are Priyavrata and Uttanapada, and 3 daughters by name Devahuti, Akuti and Prasuti. We have heard about the wonderful narration about Devahuti, her marriage to Kagdama, their stay in Kagdama Ashrama at Bindu Sarovara at the very sacred place known as Siddhashrama or Siddhapada, located on the banks of the very sacred Saraswati river. Kagdama and Devahuti first begot 9 daughters who were very great personalities and practically the Jaganmatas, the mothers of the entire universe, and how they got married to 9 very great sages. So some of the daughters of Kagdama and Devahuti are mentioned as Anasuya. Anasuya got married to Atri, and also there is Arundhati who got married to Vasishtha. Likewise there is Khyati who became the wife of Bhrigu Maharshi. So Marichi and all these great sages, their wives are actually the daughters of Kagdama and Devahuti. Kagdama and Devahuti also begot the Supreme Lord, the Supreme Absolute Truth as their son, and that incarnation of the Supreme Lord is known as Kapila Deva, who gave the very, very important teachings of Sankhya Darshana or Sankhya Yoga to his mother Devahuti. And finally, Kardama attained the supreme perfection, as well as Devahuti went back home, back to Godhead, to the spiritual world, to Vaikuntha Loka. And now in the fourth canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, we find again the description and the narration of the other children of Swayambhuva Manu and their descendants henceforth. So we first find the description of the another daughter of Swayambhuva Manu is Akuti. Akuti was married to another great sage by name Ruchi Maharshi. And Akuti and Ruchi, after their marriage, they got a very exalted son, in fact, who is another incarnation or avatara of the Supreme Lord. And he is also mentioned earlier in the second canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, in the 7th chapter, in the prayers of Lord Brahma, that Jato Rucher Ajanayad Suyaman Suyagna Akuti Sunuramaranatha Dakshinayam Lokatrayasya Mahatim Aharadyadangtim Swayambhuvena Manuna Harityanuktaha. Because Swayambhuva Manu was very eager to have the Supreme Lord in Vatsalya Rasa, in the mood of being the father of the Supreme Lord. He actually made an arrangement, an agreement with his daughter and son-in-law Akuti and Ruchi Maharshi, that the son of Akuti and Ruchi, that is Yagna, his name is Yagna Avatara or Suyagna. So Suyagna was adopted by Swayambhuva Manu. So Swayambhuva Manu adopted his grandson because he was aware that he is none other than the incarnation of the Supreme Lord. Yagna or Suyagna later married Dakshina. Suyagna and Dakshina, after their marriage, they gave birth to 12 sons who became very, very great devatas known as the Dvadasha Tushitas. So just like in the present Manvantara, which is known as Vaivasvata Manvantara, the principal devatas are the 12 Adityas, the 12 sons of Aditi, and they are known as the Dvadasha Adityas. Likewise, in the first Manvantara, that is the Swayambhuva Manvantara, the principal devatas were known as the Dvadasha Tushitas, who were the 12 sons of Suyagna and Dakshina. Now, Swayambhuva Manu had another daughter. He had 3 daughters. One is Devahuti, who got married to Kardama. The second daughter is Akuti, who got married to Ruchi Maharshi. And the third daughter got married to Daksha Prajapati. So now, in the 4th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, the first 7 chapters, chapter 1 to chapter 7, very elaborately and very beautifully narrate the history of the descendants of Daksha Prajapati, especially from his third daughter by name Prasuti. So Prasuti got married to Daksha Prajapati, and Daksha has got the administrative post of the Devata of being a Prajapati or a progenitor in the universe. So this administrative post was awarded to him by Lord Brahma himself. So now Daksha Prajapati and Prasuti, they begot 16 daughters, 16 daughters. The names of the 16 daughters of Daksha and Prasuti are given in the first chapter of the fourth canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam as uh, Shraddha, Martini, Daya, Shanti, Trishti, Pushti, Kriya, Unnati, Buddhi, Medha, Titiksha, Lajja, Murti, Swaha, Swadha, and Sati. And 13 of these daughters, the first 13 daughters, starting from Shraddha, Martini, Daya, Shanti, Trishti, Pushti, Kriya, Unnati, Buddhi, Titiksha, Lajja, were married to Dharmaraja or Yamaraja. And Swaha got married to Agni Devata. Likewise, Swadha, the 15th daughter, got married to the Pitris. And now, the youngest daughter of Daksha and Prasuti, the 16th daughter, was also the most favorite and the dearmost daughter of Daksha and Prasuti, and her name is Sati. So, Sati, even in her childhood, once when she was in her palace, she heard from the great sage Narada about the description and glories of Lord Shiva, and decided in the core of her heart that she would get married only to Lord Shiva. So Sati had made up her mind to marry Lord Shiva, but her father, Daksha Prajapati, was somehow not, he did not like Lord Shiva. He completely disapproved of the life and ways and characteristics of Lord Shiva. Just like all the devatas, they had their residences in very, very opulent heavenly kingdoms and in the various lokas. But Lord Shiva made his residence in the crematorium, in the smashana. Therefore, Lord Shiva is also known as Smashanavasi. The other devatas like Indra, Chandra, even Dharmaraja or Yamaraja, all of them would adorn themselves with very, very fragrant sandalwood paste. But Lord Shiva would smear his body with smashana, with the ashes of the smashana vibhuti or bhasma. Likewise, when the devatas would decorate themselves with nice, precious necklaces and garlands of fresh flowers, Lord Shiva would adorn himself with Mundamala, with a garland, with a necklace of skeletons, and he is also known as Nagbhushana, one who decorates himself with a serpent, with a snake. So in this way, by all material calculations, by all material considerations, Lord Shiva was not a suitable or eligible candidate for the very, very opulent Sati, or for the family prestige of Daksha Prajapati. We just find in the previous canto, in the third canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, that Swayambhuva Manu himself did not have any such material calculations and considerations, because he was an advanced spiritualist, and therefore he gave his daughter like Devahuti and Akuti in marriage to great renounced personalities and sages. Likewise, Devahuti and Kagdama gave their 9 daughters in marriage to the great sages who were materially impoverished. But Daksha Prajapati was very, very materially calculative person, and therefore he did not approve of the alliance of Sati with Lord Shiva. But later, Lord Brahma himself came, and by the order of Lord Brahma, Daksha Prajapati unwillingly, in spite of his reluctance to get his favorite and youngest daughter Sati to get married to Lord Shiva, still by the request of Lord Brahma, he finally got Sati married to Lord Shiva. So now Sati and Lord Shiva got married, and they began to live very happily with each other. And after some time, Daksha Prajapati performed a very grand sacrifice by name of Vajapeya. Vajapeya Yagna was performed by Daksha Prajapati, and at that time he invited all the great personalities of the universe, all the Devatas, all the Pitris, all the Rishis, all the sages, all the VIPs, the important personalities of the entire universe came to the sacrificial arena, to the sacrificial ceremony of Daksha Prajapati. And in that great assembly of the greatest personalities of this universe, when Daksha Prajapati entered the assembly, at that time all the devatas and all the assembled personalities, to show respect to the Yajamana, the leader of the entire assembly, that is Daksha Prajapati. Everyone stood up in respect and to show their honor to Daksha Prajapati, except for two people. One is Lord Brahma. Lord Brahma is acknowledged anyway by Daksha Prajapati to be much superior to him. And the second person who did not rise up, who did not stand up from his seat to offer honor and respect to Daksha Prajapati, is Lord Shiva. So Lord Shiva in that great assembly did not stand up in respect of Daksha Prajapati, and this was specifically observed and noticed by Daksha Prajapati, who then addressed before sitting on his great throne of the Yajamana of the entire sacrificial performance. Daksha Prajapati addressed the entire assembly and spoke very harsh words directed at Lord Shiva. He pointed the attention of all the assembled members and said and explained that how Lord Shiva was a very fallen and a shameless personality. He was Nirapatrapam. He was a shameless personality because although he had accepted an inferior position with respect to him, Lord Shiva was the son-in-law. Son-in-law is almost equivalent to a son, and therefore just like a son is always inferior to the father, yet Lord Shiva was acting shamelessly and impudently by not showing him respect by standing up like the other personalities had. Lord Shiva was also had to show respect because Daksha Prajapati was the Yajamana, was the principal personality in this sacrificial ceremony, and even by that consideration, Lord Shiva had to rise up in honor of Daksha Prajapati, and yet he did not stand up, and now Daksha Prajapati became so furious, was so filled up with rage that he began to point out many defects, many doshas, many disqualifications and so-called bad qualities of Lord Shiva, that he resides always in a dirty crematorium, and many such insults and accusations were hurled by Daksha Prajapati at Lord Shiva. And finally, Daksha Prajapati completely lost all his temper, and very in an unnecessary way he pronounced a curse on Lord Shiva that from now on Lord Shiva would not have a yagna bhaga. He would not have a share in the yagna performances in this world henceforth. So this was the curse uttered by Daksha Prajapati, and then he left from that assembly. At that time, the principal associate of Lord Shiva, who is also his carrier, his vahana, that is Nandi, Nandishvara, also became very angry, and he pronounced a curse upon all the brahmanas and all the sages who had assembled there, who had not taken any step to stop Daksha Prajapati. So when Nandi cursed the Brahmanas headed by Bhrigu Maharshi again gave a counter curse upon Nandi and the followers of Lord Shiva. And in this way, when the entire assembly was engulfed in a mood of great disturbance, was filled with anger and these negative kind of feelings and attitudes, there was cursing and counter cursing. Lord Shiva became morose. He himself was unagitated and undisturbed by all these things, by the accusations and insults of Daksha Prajapati. But now, when the entire scene at the sacrificial ceremony was thus contaminated, Lord Shiva then just rose up and left from that assembly. And he came back to his residence, and after some time, when Lord Shiva was seated with Sati, at that time Lord Shiva explained to Sati the reason for his being in such a state of so-called material impoverishment, or being in a state of complete material denial, that he did not take up any opulent loka, nor does he dress and decorate himself opulently. He stays in a crematorium. So all this is done by Lord Shiva because he wants to remain in a state of complete renunciation and detachment from all material affairs and all material connections. The reason he stays in a crematorium is also to bless the most fallen living entities in this material world, in this world, the most fallen living entities like Preta, Pusha, Pishachas, the Bhutas, and many such living entities who are not even considered, who are completely rejected by all the Devatas and Rishis and by everyone else. So they are blessed and shown the right path by Lord Shiva. And the reason, this is a very important thing revealed by Lord Shiva, that the reason for his not getting up in that assembly to show respect to Daksha Prajapati is revealed by Lord Shiva himself to Dakshayani, the daughter of Daksha Prajapati, that is to Sati Devi. Lord Shiva reveals in 4.3.23 that Sattvam Vishuddham Vasudeva Shabditam Yadiyate Tatra Puman Apavritaha Sattve Chatasmin Bhagavan Vasudevo Yadhokshacho Me Manasa Vidhiyate. Lord Shiva says that actually whenever we show respect to a person by standing up or offering obeisances either to father, mother, or spiritual master, or any superior personality, Actually, the respect is offered and shown not to the body, but to the super soul, to the Paramatma inside the heart of that living entity. And therefore, the right way to offer respect and obeisances and to honor others is with this spiritual understanding, to show respect to the Atma and to the Paramatma in the heart of the living entities. So this is the right spiritual understanding. And now Lord Shiva says that I am always he adhokshajo me manasa vidhiyate. I am always engaged in offering obeisances unto Lord Bhagavan Vasudevaha, unto the Supreme Lord Vasudeva Shri Krishna, in pure Krishna consciousness, or Sattvam Vishuddham Vasudeva Shabditam, in pure Vasudeva Sattva, or in pure Krishna consciousness. So, in which the Lord, the Supreme Lord Krishna or Vasudeva is completely revealed in that Vishuddha Vasudeva or Vasudeva Sattva, in that stage. And therefore, because I'm always in intense and complete meditation on Lord Vasudeva Krishna, whose reflection is the Paramatma in the heart of all living beings. And we are supposed to offer obeisances to Paramatma, the Lord in the heart, who is the reflection of Lord Vasudeva or Lord Krishna. And therefore, because I am always engaged in offering obeisances unto Lord Vasudeva and Krishna, to the Paramatma in the heart, there was no separate need, there was no separate requirement to stand up and offer respect to Daksha Prajapati. But this kind of a spiritual understanding was totally, utterly lacking in the personality of Daksha Prajapati, and therefore Daksha Prajapati became very annoyed, frustrated and furious at the attitude of Lord Shiva, without understanding his spiritual position and his spiritual outlook and perspective. So this is the explanation given by Lord Shiva as to why he did not rise up in respect to Daksha Prajapati in the great sacrificial ceremony of the Vajapeya Yagna organized by Daksha Prajapati. So now, Lord Shiva and Sati again continued to stay in their residence, and after some time, Daksha Prajapati performed another great sacrifice, another great worship known as the Brihaspati Sama. And at that time, during the performance of the Brihaspati Sama, Daksha Prajapati again called and invited all the important personalities, all the devatas, all the great sages and all the pitris, and he sent out the invitation to all the VIPs, the important personalities of the entire universe. But Daksha Prajapati this time, out of envy, out of animosity, he deleted one address from his database. He did not send an invitation to Shiva, to Lord Shiva, and to Sati, his most favorite and dearmost daughter, simply because of animosity and envy towards Lord Shiva. So now, on the day of the great sacrificial ceremony of the Brihaspati Sama, Sati, in her abode, she observed in the sky, the entire sky was crowded with many airplanes, with many vimanas, in which all these personalities, including her sisters, her brothers-in-law, all of them were proceeding to her father's home to participate in this grand function, in this grand ceremony. And she had not been invited along with her husband. So Sati approached Lord Shiva and explained to Lord Shiva that let us now go to our father's home and palace to participate in this grand function. Maybe Daksha would have forgotten to send us the invitation, but actually we don't need a formal invitation to go to our father's home. So let us also go to our father's home. But hearing these words, Lord Shiva replied that although I do not have any animosity, any inimical feeling towards your father Daksha Prajapati, but somehow Daksha Prajapati has taken a very inimical attitude and an envious attitude towards me, and therefore it is not appropriate on our part to go by, because if we go without even being invited, something unfavorable may happen. So, although Lord Shiva declined to accompany and come along with Sati to Daksha Prajapati's ceremonial performance, yet after some time, Sati Devi herself became so impatient that she left alone. Without Lord Shiva, she went and arrived at the sacrificial ceremony of Daksha Prajapati to her father's. So in this way, Sati came alone to her father's home, to the palace of Daksha Prajapati, and um, she now observed that in her father's palace, although she was received by her mother and all her sisters, she observed that her own father Daksha Prajapati was completely neglectful even of her arrival and her presence in his palace. So observing this, Sati Devi became very disappointed with her father's attitude, and finally she confronted her father Daksha Prajapati and explained to him that how he had become a most envious and a most offensive person. Although her husband, the great Lord Shiva, was a dosha without any fault, yet Daksha Prajapati was so impetuous and so impudent and so envious that he found so many faults with Lord Shiva. So Sati continued her address to her father that because you have become so offensive to the great exalted personality Lord Shiva, I am no longer wish to maintain any kind of a connection with you. Even the body that I have received from you, and therefore by which I am known as Dakshayani, as the daughter of Daksha, seems very despicable to me, and I shall cut off and give up all my connections with you. The body that I have received from you, I no longer wish to have it or maintain it. So in this way, Sati, now in the presence of her father, decided to give up her life. So Sati now sat in the yoga mudra, and with her mystic power she invited the yoga Agni and gave up her material frame, her material body to the flames of Agni. And now, when Sati gave up her body in the sacrificial arena of Daksha Prajapati, there was a great furor, there was a great cry of despair in all the personalities present there. Very soon, the news of Sati's death reached Lord Shiva. And when Lord Shiva heard about the death of his most beloved Sati Devi, Lord Shiva was completely absorbed in feelings of intense grief as well as great anger. Lord Shiva began the dance of destruction, the Pralaya Tandava Nritya, and he plucked out a hair from his head, and as he threw it away, a very, very ferocious personality assumed a gigantic form from his hair, and that personality is known as Veerabhadra. And being commanded by Lord Shiva, Veerabhadra immediately proceeded to the sacrificial ceremony of Daksha Prajapati, and there he confronted Daksha and he killed Daksha and he severed his head. So all these things happened, and later Lord Brahma and all the Devatas arrived and came to the place where Lord Shiva was present, and they pacified him. And after Lord Shiva was pacified by Lord Brahma and all the Devatas, Lord Shiva also forgave the action of Daksha Prajapati, and by the arrangement of the Devatas, Daksha was again restored to life, and he was affixed with the head of a goat. So therefore, Dakshaha Basta Mukho Abhut. It is stated that Daksha was affixed the head of a goat or a Bastamukha. So now, in this way, all the things were adjusted, everything became then normal. Lord Shiva also, he became peaceful, and he was pacified by the Devatas and by Lord Brahma. So in this way, the Srimad Bhagavatam, the fourth canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam explains about the history of Daksha, Lord Shiva and Sati Devi. Now let us proceed to the next section of the fourth canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is from chapter number 8 up to chapter 13. In 6 chapters is the amazing, the fascinating, the captivating, the wonderful history of another very, very great personality, a descendant or in the family of Swayambhuva Manu. Herein we find the wonderful narration of the history of Dhruva Maharaj, of Bhakta Dhruva. So it is explained, this is explained from chapter 8 to chapter 13 of the fourth canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Swayambhuva Manu, his eldest son is Priyavrata, but Priyavrata went away. He took the order of renunciation and went away to receive instructions from the great sage Narada. And his history would be further explained in the fifth canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Meanwhile, Swayambhuva Manu appointed his second son, whose name is Uttanapada. So Uttanapada became the king of the entire world. Uttanapada had two wives. The first wife is Suniti, and the second wife of Uttanapada is Suruchi. From Suniti, Uttanapada begot a son by name Dhruva, and from Suruchi he begot a son by name Uttama. Somehow, Uttanapada was very attached to his younger wife, Suruchi, and he was favorably disposed to Suruchi. And in course of time, because of his deep-rooted attachment to Suruchi, he gave all his attention to Suruchi and her son Uttama, and practically neglected to give any attention or any favor to Suniti and her son Dhruva. One day, when Uttanapada was seated on his royal throne, and he had seated Uttama, the son of Suruchi, on his lap, Dhruva entered that place, and Dhruva was a small boy of 5 years, just 5 years. So, just like a small child would also want to come close and be intimate with his father, Dhruva also approached his father and tried to climb on his father's lap. But because Suruchi was in the vicinity, Uttanapada did not welcome his son, and he showed a very partial attitude by only favoring Uttama, and he did not entertain and welcome Dhruva. Seeing the effort of Dhruva trying to climb upon his father's lap, Suruchi herself now approached Dhruva, and she pulled him away and spoke very harshly to a small innocent boy, Dhruva, that stop immediately. And she addressed Dhruva that if you wish to climb on your father's lap and on his throne, you are actually not eligible, and if you want to sit on your father's lap, you should have taken birth from my womb. So in this way, when Suruchi spoke so harshly to this young innocent boy Dhruva was deeply pained at heart, and he left from that place, and with deep pain and agony and shedding tears, he came to his mother's palace, and he approached his mother Suniti. By this time, the news of what had happened had already reached Suniti, and she was also greatly aggrieved at this kind of an attitude and what had happened with her innocent son Dhruva. So as Dhruva came crying to his mother Suniti, Suniti gave assurance, tried to pacify Dhruva, but also explained her unfortunate situation, that she was not a favorite wife of King Uttanapada, and hence she was helpless in any kind of a remedial measure to pacify Dhruva. But now Dhruva asked his mother that how can I find a solution to my predicament. So Suniti, Dhruva's mother, in order to pacify the child Dhruva, explained to him that actually everyone in this world attains various positions, attains various material and spiritual destinations and achievements only by the grace and mercy of the Supreme Lord Sri Hari, Lord Vishnu. So therefore, your father, your grandfather, and everyone in this world have attained their material and spiritual positions and destinations by the mercy of Lord Vishnu. Therefore, his mother advised him to take shelter of the Supreme Lord Vishnu, and by his grace, anything would be possible. So, Dhruva was pacified to some extent, but now he made the firm determination that I now wish to acquire a kingdom that would surpass the kingdom of my father, my grandfather, and even of my great grandfather. His father is Uttanapada, Dhruva's grandfather is Swayambhuva Manu, and his great grandfather is Brahma, who is also known as Parameshthi, or number one in this entire universe. No one can supersede or surpass the position of Lord Brahma in Brahma Loka. No one can acquire a kingdom greater than Brahma Loka, which is the topmost planet in this material world. But anything, even the impossible, actually Dhruva's aspiration was to attain the impossible. But even the impossible can be made possible by the infinite grace and mercy of the Supreme Lord, Lord Vishnu. And how this would be achieved and done, we shall see further. So now when Dhruva understood that anything can be achieved by the grace of Lord Vishnu, Dhruva then firmly decided that he shall also worship Lord Vishnu, and by his grace he would surpass even the opulence and position of his great grandfather Lord Brahma, who has got the supreme position in this material world. So then Dhruva inquired from his mother, where can I find Lord Vishnu? And his mother replied that usually Lord Vishnu is sought out. He is everyone seeks Lord Vishnu by going to the forest and engaging in penance and austerity. So Suniti did not expect, she just spoke to him to pacify the agitated Dhruva. But Dhruva had taken this as the mission of his life, and he turned and he left from the palace, and immediately he left his kingdom and proceeded to the forest. When news of this determination of Dhruva reached the great sage Narada and the Supreme Lord Vishnu, was very pleased with this kind of a determination of Dhruva, and he immediately sent his dearmost servant Narada in order to further guide Dhruva in his endeavor. So therefore, if anyone is sincere, if anyone sincerely seeks the Supreme Lord, the Supreme Absolute Truth, the Supreme Lord definitely guides and helps that sincere devotee, that sincere person, by sending the bona fide guru or the spiritual master. So now Narada Muni approached Dhruva, and first he explained to Dhruva that why have you taken this entire episode so seriously? You are a small boy, and it is very, very difficult to go to the forest and practice great penance and austerities. It is not possible to realize the Supreme Lord Vishnu so easily. It takes a very, very long time. Many times, many births are required in order to realize the Supreme Lord. This is not the right time, this is not the right age for you to go to the forest to practice penance and austerity. Right now, Dhruva, you go back to your home, back to your palace, and maybe when you grow up after a long time, then you come and try to realize the Supreme Lord Sri Hari, then you try to attain God realization. So when he was spoken in this manner, Dhruva was still not satisfied, and Dhruva further expressed his mind that although what you are speaking is right, I shall not rest until I have realized the Supreme Lord Sri Hari, Lord Vishnu. So if you are able to help me, I would be very grateful to you. So at that time, Narada, this was a test by Narada to check, to examine the determination of the young boy Dhruva, and now Narada decided to provide all spiritual guidance and instruction to Dhruva. So in this way, the Guru, the spiritual master of Dhruva, is the great sage Narada, who explained to him now. Narada instructed and guided Dhruva to go to the forest, the most sacred, the holiest forest of Madhuvana. Madhuvana is non-different from Mathura, which in later course of time would become, it is actually it is also explained in the 10th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam that Mathura Bhagavan Yatra Nityam Sannihito Harihi. Mathura or Madhuvana is the eternal abode of the Supreme Lord Sri Hari. So Narada instructed Dhruva to proceed to the most sacred forest of Madhuvana, and there he guided him how to meditate on the divine Satchidananda, the divine eternal form of Lord Vishnu. And he also then gave him the Maha Mantra, the Dvadashakshara mantra of Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So this is the 12-lettered, the Dvadashakshara Mahamantra was the initiation, the Diksha was given by Narada to Dhruva. So now, being guided and instructed by Narada, Dhruva set out and arrived at Madhuvana, and exactly following the instructions of his spiritual master Narada, Dhruva began completely and intensely. He was absorbed in the devotional meditation and the chanting of the Dvadashakshara mantra. Meanwhile, Narada Muni came to the palace of Uttanapada, who was now deeply repenting his partial behavior towards Suniti and Dhruva, and due to which Dhruva had left home. But Narada pacified and assured all the family members of Dhruva not to worry, because Dhruva Maharaj was engaged in most superhuman activity, and he would achieve something that would surpass, which would be glorified by the entire world, by the entire universe, and he would surpass the glory and position of even Lord Brahma, the foremost living entity in this universe. So as Dhruva Maharaj, now in Madhuvana, Dhruva began to practice severe penances and austerities, and it is described in the 8th chapter of the 4th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam that Triratrante Kapitha Badarashanaha Atmavrityanusarena Masam Ninye Chayan Harim. For the first month, Dhruva ate only fruits and berries on every 3rd day. And in the second month, Dhruva ate only dry grass and leaves once in 6 days. In the third month, he drank only water every 9 days. In the fourth month, Dhruva inhaled air once in 12 days and was completely absorbed in meditation on the divine form of Lord Vishnu and was constantly chanting the Dvadashakshara mantra of Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. In the fifth month, he controlled his breathing and was able to stand on just one leg and concentrate his mind completely and fully on the Parabrahman, on the Supreme Lord Vishnu. And at the end of 6 months, Dhruva had the darshan face to face of the Supreme Lord Vishnu who appeared to him. So just in a matter of 6 months, Dhruva attained the supreme perfection of having the darshan of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. And in that perfected spiritual state, in the 9th chapter of the 4th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, Dhruva initially was completely overwhelmed and overpowered by bhava, by pure love and emotion to the Supreme Lord. And finally, he was drowned in ecstasy, in the spiritual ecstasy of pure love of God, and he was unable to even utter a word. And then Lord Vishnu personally came and touched his divine conch shell on the head of Dhruva. He placed his hand on Dhruva Maharaj. And at that time, Dhruva began to offer wonderful prayers to Lord Vishnu, which are recorded in the 9th chapter of the 4th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So, the first prayer offered by Dhruva Maharaj is in 4.9.6 as Dhruva uvacha yonta pravishya mama vachamimam prasuktam sanjeevayathyakhila shakti dhara swadhamna anyamscha hastacharana shravanatvagadin pranan namo bhagavate Purushaya Tubhyam. My dear Lord, you are all powerful. After surcharging me, you have enlivened all my original spiritual senses, my spiritual hands, my spiritual legs, my spiritual ears, my sensation of touch, life force, and my power of speech. Let me offer my respectful obeisances unto you. Just by the divine transcendental touch of Lord Vishnu, all the original spiritual senses of Dhruva were now enlivened and were realized. Spiritual form, Dhruva immediately attained complete self-realization of his spiritual form, of his spiritual senses, and now on the spiritual platform, he is offering these spiritual divine prayers to Lord Vishnu. In the conclusion of his prayers, Dhruva says that he now actually expresses his regret that although he had attained the ultimate supreme perfection of God realization and had the divine vision of the Supreme Lord, initially he had approached Lord Vishnu with some material desire, with some selfish desire to attain a vast, a great kingdom. So Dhruva expresses his repentance and regret. In 4.9.31, Dhruva prays that Aho bata mamanatmyam mandabhagyasya pashyata bhavachida padamulam ghatva yache yadantavat. Alas, just look at me, I am so unfortunate. I approach the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who can immediately cut the chain of the repetition of birth and death. But still, out of my foolishness, I prayed for things that are perishable. So therefore we should always remember that we should worship the Supreme Lord, not for any temporary achievements, but only for the eternal permanent attainment of spiritual liberation, to go back home, back to Godhead. He further says that Matir vidushita devaihi patadbhihi asahishnubihi yo naradavachastatyam nagrahisham asattamaha. Since all the, he then explained that maybe all the devatas have made a conspiracy, all the devatas of the heavenly planets, they are maybe envious. They are envious of my being elevated to Vaikuntha Loka, to the spiritual world, by pure devotional service, because even the devatas cannot attain the spiritual world because they are sakama bhaktas. They are devotees of the Supreme Lord, but they are sakama. They have many material selfish desires. So therefore these devatas, being envious of Dhruva, where Dhruva may attain the spiritual world, being envious and intolerant, they have spoiled my intelligence with some material desire, and therefore I could not accept the genuine benediction of selfless devotional service as instructed by Narada. Daivi mayamupashritya prasupta iva bhinnadrik tapye dvitiyepya sati bhratri bhatavya hridrucha. I was under the influence of the Maya, the illusory energy of the Supreme Lord, my dear Lord. I was diverted by the perspective of considering my brother, my stepmother as my enemy, and thinking that they are my enemies, and lost the real spiritual vision. And finally, Dhruva says that Maya etat prarthitam vyartham chikitseva gatayushi prasadya jagadatmanam tapasa dushprasadanam bhavachidam ayacheham bhavam bhagya vivarjitaha. It is very difficult to satisfy and have the darshan of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but in my case, although I have satisfied the Supreme Lord of the entire universe, I have only prayed for vyartham, for useless things. So therefore, Dhruva says that how unfortunate I am, in spite of meeting the Supreme Lord, who can cut bhavachidam, who can cut one's link of birth and death. I have prayed for the same conditions again. So hearing these wonderful and selfless prayers of Dhruva, the Supreme Lord Vishnu, being very satisfied and pleased with these prayers, gave him all assurance that although you have had some material desire which is impossible to be fulfilled, you will attain the supreme spiritual destination of going back home, back to Godhead, and also attain the highest material position in this material world. Actually, there is nothing higher than Brahmaloka. So therefore, the Supreme Lord gave the planet which is higher than even Brahmaloka, which is the Vishnu Loka in this material world, which is known as Shveta Dvipa, which is located on the shore of the Kshira Sagara of the Milk Ocean. So this is like the local headquarters. It is like the local embassy. The local embassy of Vaikuntha Loka in the material world is Shveta Dvipa, and that is the only place higher than Brahma Loka. So Lord Vishnu gave his own abode of Shvetadvipa to Dhruva Maharaj, and that is the pole star, and that Shvetadvipa then became famous as Dhruva Loka, the pole star that is always fixed in this universe, and all the other luminaries in the sky circumambulate this supreme abode of the Lord, which was given to Dhruva. So after being supremely blessed by Lord Vishnu, Dhruva now for the time being, he returned to his home, he returned to his palace, where he was received by Uttanapada, by his father, mother, by all his family members with great jubilation. There was great celebration in the kingdom of Uttanapada when Dhruva returned back. After some time, the brother of Dhruva, that is Uttama, had gone out to the Himalayan region for hunting, and at that time he confronted a very powerful Yaksha. There was a battle between them in which the Yaksha killed Uttama, and when the mother of Uttama, Suruchi, heard about the news of the death of her son, she was so deeply aggrieved and afflicted with grief that even Suruchi died at that time. So, hearing this news, Dhruva became furious. He went to Alakapuri, and the capital of the Yakshas, and there was a terrible battle between Dhruva and the Yakshas, in which Dhruva was almost victorious, but in that terrible battle, because the Yakshas were being greatly tormented and afflicted for insignificant reason, so finally Swayambhuva Manu and Lord Brahma came and stopped that fight and instructed Dhruva to return back to his kingdom. So then Dhruva came back and continued to, then he became the king of his kingdom, and he ruled for a very long time. Dhruva married two wives. The names of the two wives of Dhruva are Brahmi and Ila. From Brahmi he got two sons by name Kalpa and Vatsara, and from Ila he begot the son by name Utkala. So in this way Dhruva Maharaj ruled for a very long time, and finally he again went to the forest and practiced severe penance and austerities and completely absorbed himself in the pure devotional service of the Supreme Lord Shri Krishna, and finally his liberation is very wonderfully described in the 12th chapter of the 4th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, how Dhruva Maharaj went back to the spiritual world, first to the local spiritual planet in the material world, the Shvetadvipa, and attained the pole star that is not destroyed even when the entire universe is destroyed, because it is part of, it is a amsha, it is a portion, it is an expansion of Vaikuntha Loka. So it is explained in 4.12.25 that Sudurjayam Vishnu Padam Jitam Tvaya Yetsurayo Prapya Vichakshate Param Atishtatat Chandra Divakaradayo Grahakshatara Pariyanti Dakshinam. When finally Dhruva attained the perfection of his devotional activities, one day in the forest, a spiritual airplane, Vimana from Vaikuntha Loka came, which was and the personalities by name Nanda and Sunanda addressed him that to achieve Vishnu Loka or Vaikuntha Loka is very, very difficult, but by your devotional endeavor, you have conquered the Supreme Lord's heart, and you are now eligible, qualified to come back to the spiritual world. Even the greatest of sages and the Devatas cannot achieve this position to go back to Vaikuntha Loka. Simply to even see the supreme abode of Vaikuntha Loka, the sun and moon and all the planets, stars and lunar mansions and solar systems are circumambulating it. Now, please come, you are welcome to come there. अनास्थितं ते पितृभिः अन्येरप्यङ्गकर्हिचित् आतिष्ठ जगतां वन्द्यं तद्विष्णोः paramam padam. My dear King Dhruva, neither your forefathers nor anyone else before you ever achieved the supreme planet of Vaikuntha Loka. Swayambhuva Manu achieved it later, but the first person to go back to Vaikuntha Loka in the universe after creation is Dhruva Maharaj. So, the Vaikuntha Loka is the highest, the supreme among all the places. It is worshipable by the inhabitants of all other planets. So please come with us and live there eternally. Tad Vishnoho Paramam Padam Etad Vimana Paravaram Uttama Shloka Maulina Upasthapitam Ayushman Adhirodhum Tvamarhasi. This unique airplane has been sent by the Supreme Lord Vishnu, and you are quite worthy to board this plane. So now, as Dhruva Maharaj prepared to board the airplane from Vaikuntha Loka, from the spiritual world, suddenly a personality very rapidly, very hurriedly came rushing towards Dhruva Maharaj, and that was Mrityu, death personified. Mrityu Murti, Mrityu Vigraha came rushing towards Dhruva Maharaj, not to kill Dhruva Maharaj, but to take the dust of the lotus feet of the great pure devotee Dhruva Maharaj. Mrityu came and Dhruva placed his lotus feet on the head of Mrityu and climbed the spiritual airplane from Vaikuntha Loka and set out to the spiritual world, to Vaikuntha Loka. But now, as Dhruva was proceeding, just a thought came in his mind that today I am the first person to achieve the most exalted destination of going back to the spiritual world, to Vaikuntha Loka, and all this was actually made possible by the mercy of my spiritual master Narada Muni, and my first spiritual master was actually my mother Suniti, because it was she who guided him that you should take shelter of the Supreme Lord Vishnu. And Dhruva just got a thought that how nice it would be if even she could accompany me back to the spiritual world. And at that time, the pilots of that spiritual airplane, Nanda and Sunanda, just indicated to Dhruva, look back. And as Dhruva turned around, he saw another spiritual airplane in which was seated his mother Suniti, who was also now coming along with Dhruva back home, back to Godhead. So this is the wonderful history of the narration and the ultimate and supreme achievement and attainment of Dhruva Maharaj. So therefore, in this way, Dhruva attained the supreme destination, and by the mercy of Dhruva, even his mother attained the most exalted destination in this universe. So this is the wonderful history of Dhruva. If you have any questions about today's subject matter, you are welcome to post them on the WhatsApp group or in the comments box. Please do like our videos and please do subscribe to our YouTube channel, and please do join us in the continuation of the systematic study of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.